Okay, I'm very, very, very thrilled to be here with Ysanne Lewis. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Rasheed.
We're here in the heart of central London, and I want to, it's daytime, but I know that part of your work has to do with the stars, timing, and all the rest of it. So you're an astrologer, and people are fascinated by astrology, and when we first met, I was fascinated by astrology. And then you told me, you started talking about, astrology's got a lot to do with timings, charts, maps. I guess in all aspects of our lives, we often are following charts, timetables, and so on. Tell me, in a nutshell, from your perspective, what is it all about? What is it actually all about?
Oh, how long is a piece of string? Goodness. Well, I suppose I learnt astrology over 35 years ago to almost like to prove it to myself.
Right.
Because I thought, how can we be 1/12 of the population, 12 signs of the zodiac?
Right.
In fact, somebody said to me, who actually was a scientist, but he had studied astrology, he said, do you know your moon sign? And I said, no, what is it? And he said, well, that has to be done with calculations. It's a very fast orbital speed compared to the movement of the Earth around the Sun. So I learned the mathematics, and I realised what a complex math.
So that's interesting straight away, isn't it? Because as you said, first of all, often we think about the 12 signs of the zodiac, and you're either this or you're that. But actually there's so much more to it than that, presumably. And I guess it's also one of the things that fascinates me when I think about it is that in so many things we are actually guided by the sun and the stars. I imagine back in the day when people were navigating across the earth, they looked to where the sun direction is and where the moon is and where the stars are, and people still do to this time, even if you listen to weather forecasts. So I guess there's real science in here, isn't there? What was it that you learned when you then first of all were curious to find out a little bit more than your own star sign?
That we know that we're very complex as a species. We are a mass of contradictions within us. And somehow the beauty of it is to be adaptable, normal, whatever normal is, human beings. We have to somehow synthesize all these different aspects of our psyches and bring them through as a kind of presentation. And is that
what people are understanding their I guess not just their sign, but the specifics that relate to their own chart is about. So walk us through that, because you said there's a number of different elements about that. So presumably that's about the time I was born. It will be, I guess, tell us a little bit about what are the different factors that help somebody understand their own, their own map of the world.
Indeed. Well, the word map is really interesting, Rasheed, because we need maps in life, even if we use sat-nav a lot in the car. But it's fascinating that each one of us has an individual map, and we're all on a journey. And along that journey we've got crossroads, there's detours, there's different scenery, and we all choose those different things. So when a person comes to see me, I ask for them, very simply, their full date of birth, including the year, if they know it, the time on the clock when they were born, and the longitude, latitude, in other words, the town of birth.
Right, so what you're saying is really fascinating to me. So it's almost like we're getting a precise location, which will help us chart effectively where they were at that point of birth, and therefore how things have manoeuvred over the years. Is that essentially what it's about, by understanding almost like in the same way that you might find out a ship's location and so on, and then how it charts and how it moves over a period of time. Navigating. It's about that. So you're starting off with that data, the time, the town, and so on. That helps you get what coordinates about that person's coordinates.
And that's what I call the left brain, the logical linear side, and the calculations, that plot. That moment when you're born, certainly the day you're born, and it's almost like a clock is set into motion, and the clocks outside, like in the sky, in the heavens, are moving. And at certain points in our life they synchronise with the aspects of us which are more flowing, are more harmonious, up volume if you like. And there are other times, as we all know, when we feel out of alignment with time, our energy is lower, and my job partly is to get people in touch with those cycles, those rhythms. Right,
so that's interesting again. So I guess what you're pointing to is that there may be certain times where we're feeling more buoyant, where we're feeling more low, where things seem to be in flow for us, or when things seem to be stuck. And you're saying that some of those things may well be linked to where we are in our own flow, in the same way that there's clocks, there's body clocks, there's all the rest of that clocks. It's almost as though this all ties into it. So, how did you, how on earth did you learn this? Because I imagine then there's lots to learn, and what are the main, for somebody who's a complete novice like me, what are some of those main themes, and what are some of those main influences of what some, so for example, I might hear that, okay, where was the moon when I think, tell me about some of those aspects and why they're significant.
Each of the planets, which you're familiar with by name, represent a character, a major character that lives within us. So the moon is very much how we link with our mother, our first 7 years of life, the kind of home we want, how comfortable we are in our inner home. The moon is always a timekeeper. It can trigger responses, how you respond to events. And when the slower moving planets form particular angles to our own chart, yes, they certainly indicate some of the major crossroads, and the moon can come along, if you like, and be a trigger for the timing, more exact timing on it.
As you were saying that, I was fascinated, and one of the things that struck me, I thought to myself, oh, this is very interesting. You said the moon, like some other things. First of all, I was just trying to think that through, and then I thought, well, I guess the moon is in many ways the nearest large star, so that would make sense, just for me again as a novice, because it's closer. I found out from somebody recently that lots of people grow certain vegetables and so on by the moon and so on. So this stuff is really fascinating. Does somebody need to? Do people need to understand or believe in this to get value from it? I'd imagine that lots of people come to you and they're stuck and they need a different way through. Do they need to have an understanding or even buy into it in order to get value from that? And do you find a lot of the time that people know nothing about it, but then you're suddenly revealing aspects of them that is really clearly spot on and very useful for them?
Well, I see the birth chart based on the data of time and place and date of birth as a mirror of the person. That chart lives within you. Right. For whatever reason, we're born at a particular point in time and into a family line. And what is interesting, Rasheed, is how many horoscopic connections there are between parents, grandparents, and one's own chart. There's themes which make sense genetically. So and there's a lot of research going on to do with our biological clocks and the cosmic clocks out there. And I think we have these inner timekeepers. We are all natural astrologers in the sense that our bodies have a knowingness of our yearly, our daily, and other cycles, biological cycles. Right. And in a way, that creates a framework for our own natural diaries. Right. And if we can trust those processes, because I think, whilst we're in bodies, we are beings of cycles. And when we get influenced so much by the outer world, we lose a sense of our inner. I see.
So it's almost as though once somebody becomes aware of their own chart, of their own coordinates and so on, they are far more able to find out when they're on track, when they're aligned. A bit like when we talk about planets and so on are aligned, and when they're not aligned, which will help them guide themselves through the world rather than purely feel as though they're completely reactive to what's going on.
Exactly. I think also what you said about, does somebody need to know anything in advance? No. One can come along knowing nothing. That's my job. And I do quite a lot of charts for babies. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be talking to the babies.
But is that because parents? Is it because parents are curious just to find out a little bit more about? But this is fascinating because I understand that in a way that therefore you also were just somebody like the rest of us who is just curious about this field. You looked more into it and more into it. Tell us a little bit about. I know that you do work here. You do work in Europe. You've been to the Far East and so on. And I understand from a chat that we had ages ago that you were working in a very traditional job. I think you were working in local news, but maybe it's something related to sales and so on. And suddenly had some time off, and then suddenly the next thing,
I know
you were off, and this career had begun. And suddenly, within quite a short period of time, you were being asked to do readings for all sorts of people. Has this journey for you taken you by surprise? That were you surprised that that this has kind of called you or taken you on this particular journey? Did you predict that? Could you see that for yourself, or has it been quite a surprise about how life's just unfolded that way?
It is a natural, organic process.
Right.
I'd always been interested in these kinds of subjects.
Right.
My family, my grandparents, my parents, and I really wanted to be self-employed.
Right.
And I'd learnt this. I had the time as a hobby, if you like, to do the courses. It took several years. And then I thought, why not? 1979, it was a very different world then. And I thought, let's do it for a year. I did written charts. And somehow it did choose me. I don't like that kind of nebulous New Agey statement, but I really feel that meaning of the word vocation comes to mind. And 35 years on, I'm still doing it. Yeah. And I've travelled abroad, been on speaking platforms, written. I make the subject accessible to the layperson. I don't use the technical words. I put it into everyday language, and I work with everyday people, students. Right.
What are the main reasons why? What are the main reasons why people come to you? Is it because are they feeling often lost? Do they want to get more clarity? Do they feel often that you used the word before that they're at a crossroads? What are the typical factors of why people come to you? Give me some of those scenarios. I'm sure they're varied.
Very good question, Rasheed. They come sometimes out of curiosity, and that's enough. They've been given it as a gift, and they get more than they bargained for.
Right.
In that sense, they come because they're at a crossroad, and in some languages, the word crossroad, crisis, opportunity, all mean the same in the symbols. And they are looking to make decisions, and it's not my job to say what they should do. I'm not a fortune teller. I think we have free will. More than we abuse it, I think we neglect it. We're lazy. So people come and they actually want to find some answers, and my job really is to help them to find that by understanding themselves better through the information that the chart can provide.
Right.
I suppose the background, because we're so conditioned in life, Rasheed, aren't we? And who are we at the end of the day? Whose life are we living? And we actually can sublimate so many aspects of us. Right. It's like actors who are stage fright and don't come on stage. And I think it's important to be able to have a clearer look at our whole nature and then to make that leap forward.
Right. I think
and to find the right timing.
But this it is very interesting, isn't it? Because it would seem that people do get to certain times in their life and they do seek all sorts of different help. I mean, I'm a good example as a coach and so on. And what fascinates me is, again, people are coming because they're wanting to get that kind of clarity. I get the feeling that when you're helping people understand the aspects of the chart, and you kindly did my job, what fascinated me was that you gently brought to the fore various themes that then, as you mentioned them, made sense to me. Something like, so it's almost this like you didn't tell me what I didn't know, but you said things in a completely different way, but they actually accentuated and highlighted really important things. So again, it made sense to me.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yes, it made sense to me. Do you find that happens a lot, that you're saying this and somehow it makes sense to them, and it's almost as though, and that might tie in exactly what you're saying about their own inner knowledge, because you've said something that perhaps clicks in with them in some way, so they're like, yep, I know exactly what you might think.
They feel, yes, as you've just said, people often say it's not much we didn't know, but it gives them the confidence when they're wobbling a little bit about, I don't know, should I, shouldn't I, is this really me? When I was young I was told I was no good at that, other people are putting me off. It gives that endorsement, because although I like to think I'm a caring individual, I want people to be happy, in an objective, clinical way. I don't mind what they do with their lives or what talents they have, so I'm giving an objective viewpoint. And I think that's the beauty that lies in the complexities of this map, which shows how we fit into our family line, where we've come from, what education should have suited us best, and the turning points of looking at the various talents we have, and the character roles we have within us, and when are they ready to come on stage. And I think we know these things, but I think it just helps to tweak it a little.
So it is fascinating. I mean, when, for example, you talk about the different kind of character roles and different aspects, is that because, and again, we won't have that much time to go into it in depth, but it's fascinating. Is it because some of these different themes, different planets, have different aspects, personalities, features that therefore give clues? I'm trying to liken it. Obviously, I mean, it's funny. I've just used it because it just comes to mind. It's funny that, you know, I'm a Gemini. So, and people say that's an air sign. I don't know much about that. But when talk about people communication, it's very true. I work a lot of time in broadcast. I use language a lot of. I find things very, very fluid and so on. So, what strikes me is that many of those themes, and I know there's lots of other stuff that do provide ways in, and then I guess that's where, or then once you bring a number of those different aspects together, that they can often paint a fuller picture. Is that what we're?
I think that's true. We're putting the jigsaw together to create wholeness. And you mentioned Gemini, but the Geminis of this world, whether it's your sun sign, which it is, the month you're born in, or it tends to be the sign which other planets are in, or was rising when you were born, and that's based on the time of birth. I would say that the learning curve and the task, which is perhaps a nicer word, is about learning language and communication. You may, for example, and I don't remember your chart obviously at the moment, may have planets in what we call the water signs of the zodiac, which are more feeling, non-verbal, or earth ones, where you really want to see the productive outcome of your ideas.
Yeah, and that's
you
true.
See how it all starts to come together.
Well, it does, and it's, as you say, that's all very, very, very true. So I'm then fascinated, I guess, that, I mean, one of the things that I guess take away from this, it's interesting that we're at a time whereby, as a species, we're still constantly learning. You touched on it before, that people will be talking about everything the body got to the being so much about the DNA, what's the thing, and so it seems that we're constantly learning. People will tell us, for example, of stardust. So it just fascinates me how much we're still learning. Tell me, from your perspective, what is it that why do you remain passionate about what you're doing? You pointed on this, and what is it about? Is it about? I mean, you talked about before, you know, you want to be your own boss, but I get the feeling that this is far more than that. You're genuinely interested in people and how they can navigate their way through life. So for you, what is your work about?
I think it makes a kind of sense. It gives an order to everything we feel and experience. Right. Again, it comes back to navigating. Right. That's why I like to call myself also a timing consultant. I use other techniques as well. But it is beautiful how we know our own timing, but the chart just puts us back in touch with it. Right. And now that you've mentioned this thing about timing, I think maybe we should touch on that because I guess this is a key theme. I guess that when I just want to briefly explore what happens when the timing is wrong. So, for example, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, for somebody? I guess that if somebody might rush a particular decision, they might not feel ready for something, they might feel that they're pushed in anything from a job that wouldn't be the right job to maybe wait for a little while to give themselves a breather, to, on a more extreme thing, they might go into a marriage that might not fit. I guess that timing's on one day-to-day level. If my timing's slightly off, I miss a bus, but if it's more serious, I miss a flight and something more. What's that all about?
So I guess that timing is very, 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 very important here. Do you kind of find that when people aren't mindful or self-aware about their timing, all sorts of challenges emerge from? Is that what essentially all of this is about? And when it becomes a real crossroads crisis, as you say, point, is that what happens?
And also when something unexpected comes up in your life, and it's like a curveball, you know, and you just think, oh gosh, you know, it's like an actor being given a script he's not familiar with, and all of a sudden the script's gone missing, and they've got to, you know, improvise. So I think it's when we get wobbly and we think, oh, am I confident about what I'm doing? Right. And that's when our timing can be a bit, askew. So people come a lot to do with timing. Sometimes it's clinical in the sense of what is the best time, we looked at this, for an event. And yes, we can force it, we can sort of make it happen, but what is the landscape, the atmosphere of it? Maybe it gets cancelled. Maybe not many people turn up if it's a talk. So we can actually choose timing, the optimum timing for an event, or for signing a contract, for running a seminar. things of that kind.
And this is fascinating, and I think that for people who are wanting to know more, I'm going to invite them to go to your website. But because you flagged it up, is part of that reason why that bubbles up? Is it because that may well be a time when, I'm just thinking from a point that just came to my mind, we're in the middle of the Commonwealth Games at the moment.
Yes, indeed.
Timing's also very important for athletes, and it may well be that the time people talk about their, for example, their their off season or their training, so it might well be that their energy levels, for example, aren't at their height or that. Are we talking about stuff that's there for essentially linked? That part of that, let's say you gave the example of a contract, whatever it might be, because they're not at their optimum.
Yes.
Is that a large part of it? And
that I feel comes up when who's the tennis player? I know you like tennis.
Yeah.
And guy, I'm sorry, I forget who it was now, but he really did a bad performance. Toward the end, he lost.
Okay.
And I was curious about that to see. And I don't know his chart, that would be interesting, what his energy levels were about. Right. It's like when we're more accident prone as well. What's that all about? Yeah. So we all have times during the day when our energy is up or down, our timing's better. We have actually, through astrology, I can see even as much as months when perhaps the energy is low, and I'll say, well, if you can, try and pace yourself more.
It's very
take a little holiday more, or sabbatical. And people often say, that's what I was thinking.
It's very interesting that I always just think of that, because I just think that I'm very mindful about which times of my day, if I've got to do, for example, logical work, at my best times of day, I can talk, probably because of the things that we've said, I can deliver talks, I can coach people at any time. That's easy for me. But there might be certain times of paperwork and so on that I would tend to do at certain times of the day. And it's interesting you talk about certain times of the year. I often find that there's often certain... So again, this is really fascinating. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but if people are trying to find you, what's the best website to find you on? Because there's so much more to discover.
Well, it's very simple. Yeah. It's Ysanne.
With YSANNE.
Ysanne.com.
Yeah.
And I have a blog site called catchingthewave.com.
Right.
So it's all there. And I'd also just briefly like to mention much of my work now, particularly with timings with the business world.
Right.
And I'm working a little bit with the stock market, economic predictors.
Wow.
Basically, you're matching planetary data to finance, I suppose.
Wow,
and people look about the start of businesses.
Fantastic.
And best time to invest.
Yeah.
So I do feel astrology is a smorgasbord to put so many things on.
But then that's interesting. So we're going to go. But some people from who you might think are very, very logical world, they come and consult you.
Yes.
Well,
I must say that people in power many times, and also in the financial world, do use astrology. Right. Banks do as well.
Right. Fascinating.
Definitely.
Oh, that's fascinating to know. Well, Ysanne, thank you very much. I just want to thank you. I'm going to leave you to smile at the camera as I turn it off, but thanks so much for your time and all the best with your work.
Rasheed.
Oh,
thank
real
you
pleasure.
Very much.
Thanks so much.
This.
Right, bye-bye.